How the economy machine works in 30 minutes. The economy machine works like a simple machine, but many people don't understand it, or they don't agree on how it works. And this has led to a lot of needless economic suffering. I feel a deep sense of responsibility to share my simple but practical economic template. Though it's conventional, this helped me to anticipate to sudden global financial crisis, and it's worked well for me for over 30 years. Let's begin. Though the economy might seem complex, it works in a simple mechanical way. It's made of a few simple parts and of a lot of simple transactions that are repeated over and over again a zillion times. These transactions are overall else driven by human nature, and they create three main forces driving the economy. Number one, productivity growth. Number two, the short-term debt cycle. And number three, the long-term debt cycle. We look at these three forces, how link them on top of each other, create good template tracking economy movements and figuring out what's happening now. Let's start with the simplest part of the economy, transactions. An economy is simply the sum of transactions and make it up. And a transaction is a very simple thing. You make transactions all the time. Every time you buy something, you create the transactions. Each transaction consists of a buyer exchanging money or credit with a seller for goods, services, for financial assets. Credit spending just like money, so adding together the money spent and the amount credit spent, you could know the total spending. The total amount of spending drives the economy. If you divide the amount spent by the quantity sold, you get the price. And that's it. That's transactions. It's the building block of the economy machine. All cycles, all processes in economy driven by transactions. So if you understand transactions, if you can understand the whole economy, our market consists of all the buyers, all the sellers, making transactions for the same thing. For example, there is wheat market, a car market, a stock market. Our market is for millions of things. An economy consists of all of the transactions with all of its market. If you add up the total spending and total quantity sold in all of the markets, you have everything you need to understand the economy. It's just that simple. People, businesses, banks, and governments all engage transactions with we just described, exchanging money and credit for goods, services, and financial assets. The biggest of the buyers, sellers, governments, which consists of two important parts. A central government that collects taxes and spends money, and a central bank, which is different from the buyer seller because it controls the amount, money, and credit economy. It does this by influencing interest rates and printing new money. For these reasons, as we see, the central bank is an important player and flow of credit. I want you to pay attention credit. Credit is the most important part of the economy and probably least understood. It's the most important part because biggest and most volatile part. Just like buyers, sellers go to the market to make transactions. So the lenders borrow. Lenders usually want to make their money into more money. And borrow usually want to buy something mechanical for, buy a house, buy a car. When I want to buy like something business. It's the buyers, sellers go to the market to make transactions. So the lenders and borrowers. Lenders usually want to make their money into more money, and borrowers usually want to buy something they can't afford, like a house or a car, or they want to invest in something like startup businesses. Credit can help both the lenders and borrowers get what they want. Borrowers promise to repay the amount they borrow, called principal, plus additional amount, called interest. When interest rates are high, there is less borrow because it's expensive. When the interest rate is low, borrowing increases because it's cheaper. When borrowers promise to repay, and lenders believe them, credit is created. Any two people can agree to create credit out of thin air. That seems simple enough, but credit is tricky because it has different names. As soon as credit is created, it immediately turns into debt. Debt is both an asset to the lender and a liability to the borrower. In the future, when the borrower repays the loan plus interest, the asset and the liability disappear and the transaction is zero. So why is credit so important? Because when a borrower receives credit, he is able to increase his spending. And remember, spending drives the economy. This is because one person's spending is another person's income. Think about it. Every dollar you spend, someone else earns, and every dollar you earn, someone else spends. Someone spends more, someone else earns more. When someone's income rises, it makes lenders more willing to lend him money because now he's more worthy credit. A credit-worthy borrower has two things: ability to pay and collateral. Having a lot of income in relation to his that gives him the ability to repay, and if he can't repay, he has valuable assets to use as collateral that can be sold. This makes lenders feel comfortable lending him money. So increased income allows increased borrowing, which allows increased spending. And since one person's income spending is another person's income, this leads to more increased borrowing, and so on. This self-enforcing pattern leads to economic growth, and is why we have cycles. In the transactions, you have to give something in order to get something. And how much you get to depends how much you produce. Over time, we learned, and not accumulated knowledge with oasis in living standard. We call this productivity growth. Those who invest with hard working raise their productivity and their living standards faster than those who are complacent and lazy. But that isn't necessarily true of the short run. Productivity matters most in the long run, but credit matters most in the short run. This is because productivity growth doesn't fluctuate much, so it's not a big drives the economy swings. That is because a lot allows consume more than we produce when you cut is to produce when you have to pay back. The swings occur into big cycles. One takes about 5 years, and the other takes about 75 to 100 years. While most people fear the swings, they typically don't see them as cycles because they see them too close, day by day, week by week. In this chapter, we're going to step back, look at the history back process and how they interact to make up our experiences. As mentioned, the swings alone rely not due to how much innovation or hard work there is. They are primarily due to how much credit there is. Let's for a second imagine an economy without credit. In this economy, one way I increases my spending is this increases my income, which requires me to be more productive and do more work. Increases productivity is the only way for growth. Since my spending is another person's income, the economy grows every time anyone else is productive. If you follow the transactions and play this out, we see a progression, but the productivity grows for life. But because we buy or borrow, we have a cycle. This isn't due to any more regulation. It's due to human nature and the way the credit works. Think about borrowing and simply way pulling spending forward. In order to buy something you can afford, you need to spend more you make. To do this, you essentially need to borrow future self. In doing so, you create a time in the future that you need to spend less than you make in order to pay back. You very quickly example cycle. Basically, anytime borrowing creates a cycle. This is true for individual as it is for economy. This is why I understand credit is so important, because it sets into motion a mechanical, predictable series of events that will happen in the future. This makes it from money. Money is settled transactions with. When you buy your beer from bartender with cash, the transaction is settled immediately. But when you buy your beer credit, it's next to the bartender. You see them promise to pay in the future. Together, you and the bartender create the asset and a liability. You just create that credit out of thin air. It's not only unoccupied but a year later that the asset and liability disappear, that the gold goes away and the transaction settle. The reality, the most black people call money is actually credit. The total amount of credit in the United States is about $50 trillion, and the total amount of money is only about $3 trillion. Remember, in an economy without credit, the only way increases spending to produce more. But in an economy with credit, you can also increase your spending by borrowing. As a result, an economy with credit has more spending and allows income to rise faster than productivity over the short run, but not over the long run. Now don't get me wrong, credit is necessarily something bad just across cycles. It's bad when the financial asset or consumption can be paid back. However, it's good when it efficiently reallocates resources and produce income so you can pay back to them. For example, if you borrow the money by your big TV, it doesn't generate income paid at them. But if you borrow money to save a tractor, and that's it right there, let's harvest more crops and normal money, then you can pay back to that, produce a living standard. In an economy with credit, we can follow the transactions to see how the credit grows. Let me give you an example. Suppose you earn $110,000 year and have no debt. Your credit already enough for borrowing $10,000, say on a credit card. So you can spend $110,000 even though you earn only $100,000. Since your spending is another person's income, someone is $110,000. The person earning $110,000. You know that can borrow $11,000, so you can $121,000, even though he also only earned $110,000. His spending is another person's income, and by following the transactions, you can begin to see how this process works in a process parallel. But remember, borrowing creates cycles. And if the cycle goes up, it eventually needs to come down. This leads into the short-term debt cycle. As economic activity increases, we see expansion for post-based short-term debt cycle. Spending continues increases and prices start to rise. This happened because increases spending fueled by credit, which can be credit in the other scenario. But the amount of spending income grows faster than production of goods. Prices rise. When prices rise, we call this the inflation. The central bank doesn't work too much inflation because it's people's problem. Seeing prices rise, it raises interest rates. With higher interest rate, fewer people can afford borrowed money, and the cost is existing debt rises. Think about this monthly payment to your credit card going up. Because people borrow less and higher debt payments, they have less money over to spending, so spending slows. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes drop, and so on and so forth. When people spend less, prices go down. We call this deflation. Economic activity decreases and you have a recession. If the recession becomes too severe and inflation is no longer a problem, the central bank lowers interest rates because everything to pick up again. With lower interest rates, debt payments reduce and borrowing spending pick up, and you see another expansion. As you can see, the economy works like a machine. In the short-term debt cycle, spending constrained only by willingness renders borrow, provide, and receive credit. When credit is easily available, there's economic expansion. When credit isn't easily available, there's a recession. And note that this cycle controlled primarily by the central bank. The short-term debt cycle typically lasts 5 to 8 years and happens over and over again for a decade. But notice the bottom and top of each cycle finish with more growth previous cycle and with more debt. Why? Because people push it. They have inclination to borrow and spend more instead of paying back the debt. It's human nature. Because this over long periods of time, debts rise faster than income. created the long-term debt cycle. Despite people becoming more indebted, lenders even more extend credit. Why? Because everything wants things going great. People just focus on what's been happening lately. And what's been happening lately? Incomes have rise, asset values are going up. The stock market rose. It's a boom. It pays to buy you goods, services, and financial assets with borrowed money. When people do a lot of that, we call it bubble. So even though that's even growing, incomes even growing nearly exceeds the offset. Let's call the ratio of debt to income debt burden. So long as incomes continue to rise, the debt burden stays manageable. At the same time, asset values soar. People borrow huge amounts of money by your asset as an investment, causing the crisis to rise even higher. People feel wealthy. So even though he accumulates lots of debt, while his income and asset value help borrower remain creditworthy from a long time. But that obviously cannot continue forever, and it doesn't. Over decades, debt burden slowly increases, creating a large and large debt repayments. At some point, debt repayments stop going faster than income, forcing people to cut back on the spending. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes begin to go down, which makes people less creditworthy, causing borrowing go down. Debt repayments continue to rise, which makes spending drop even further, and the cycle reverses itself. This is long-term debt peak. Long-term debt peak. Debt burden simply becomes too big. But the United States to Europe and much of the rest of the world happened in 2008. It happens the same reason it happened in Japan in 1989 and the United States back in 1929. Now the economy begins to deleveraging. In the deleveraging, people cut spending, incomes fall, credit disappears, asset prices drop, banks get squeezed, the stock market crashes, social tensions rises, and the whole instance flipping out on itself the other way. As incomes fall, debt repayments rise, borrow is squeezed. No longer creditworthy, credit drives up, and borrowers can no longer borrow enough money to make debt repayments. Scrambling to fear the whole borrower's first asset. The lost sell asset plus the market at the same time is spending for. This is where the stock market collapses. The real estate tanks and banks get scared. Banks in trouble. Asset prices drop. The value of the collateral borrower can drop. This makes the borrower even less creditworthy. People feel poor. Credit rapidly disappear. Less spending, less income, less wealth, less credit, less borrowing, and so on. It's a vicious cycle. This feels similar to last situation, but different from here is that interest rates here can be lower to set that up. In a recession, lowering interest rates first will stimulate borrowing. However, in a deleveraging, lower interest rates doesn't work because interest rates already soon hit 0%, so the stimulus ends. Interest rates in the United States is 0% during the deleveraging in 1930 and again 2008. The difference from the recession and the deleveraging is that in the deleveraging, borrowing debt burdens simply got too big and can't really by lowering interest rates. Lenders realize that becomes large and will be pulling back. Borrower has lost the ability to repay and collateral lost value. They feel crippled by debt. They even want more. Lenders stop lending, borrowers stop borrowing. Think of the economy as being not creditworthy, just like an individual. So what do you do about the leveraging?